Hi guys, this is Wine Festival Online. Welcome to some of you and welcome back to others. Thanks so much for tuning in.
So we're Susie and Peter, we're both masters of wine and we are co-founders of Wine Festival Winchester, which this year is of course Wine Festival Online.
So now we are really excited to introduce Mimi Avery, the fifth generation at Averys Wine Merchants in Bristol.
Absolutely. So I think quite a few of you will know Mimi and her wines from the festival before. They've both been very, very popular, and today she is coming to us from her beautiful wine cellar shop in Bristol, where there has actually been a wine merchant on site since the 18th century.
Yeah, so lovely historic surroundings there. There is mention in this masterclass of Chateau Petrus and the perfect wedding wine. Intriguing. And also Mimi has a table, bizarrely, from the Mauritania, the famous ship that she's in front of her. Just a nice detail.
It's a detail. It's a kind of detail you like. Anyway, so she is going to be pouring some blended French wines. Get the white out of the fridge now, get those reds open, and then you'll be all ready to start with Mimi very shortly.
Thanks very much to our sponsors, particularly our headline sponsor, Rathbones. And we also, don't forget, have some competitions running at the moment with some brilliant wines as prizes, the tasting selfie competition and also the Sharp Eyes competition. Details are on the website.
They are indeed. If you have any problems today with viewing any of these videos, then please just email us at hello@thewinefestival.co.uk, or you can get in touch with us via social, and all the details that you need for that are on our website.
This video will stay live after the event, of course, and if you're watching it, then hello to you. And of course, there is another masterclass coming up immediately after this one if you're watching. One thing we need to say, buy, because Mimi is very kindly offering £15 off, special offer for people who buy these wines after the festival.
So we really hope that you enjoy Mimi's masterclass, and we will hand over now to her to take you to Bristol.
Hello, welcome to Winchester Wine Festival and the Averys Masterclass. My name's Mimi Avery, for any of you who haven't met me in the past, and I'm delighted to be talking to you about three of our Averys own label wines, which have always proved popular at the Winchester Wine Festival. Averys Wine Merchants has been going since 1793. We're based in Bristol, but we deliver wine around the country, and we have a fantastic cellar shop, of which I'm in the event space downstairs at the moment. So if you're ever in the Bristol area, do come and visit us. We have a fantastic group of wine advisors on the phone who will be there to answer your every question if you have any after this, and if you want to buy any of the wines. Details are on the Winchester Wine Festival website. So yes, I'm Mimi Avery. I'm fifth generation. There was a wine merchant on this premises, literally this square footage, in 1793, and in the 1850s this became Averys. This particular space was rebuilt then and was our port and sherry blending area, and we bottled the wines there too. And more recently it was our #1 bonded warehouse. My grandfather joined the business in the 1920s, and he made a name for us with Bordeaux and Germany wines, and he used to travel. He was one of the sort of pioneers of travelling to visit a winery and a vineyard and the winemakers. And he used to go around in his motor launch and drive up the Gironde and moor up in Libourne and go and visit some of his suppliers. This he was doing from the 20s and 30s onwards. So in the 1930s, he liked ships, you'll gather that. He went to the scrapping of the Mauritania, and quite a few pieces came from there, and our shop that was on the other side of Park Street is actually full of the panelling from the Mauritania. And for example, this table that I'm sat at now is a Mauritania table. One of them still has the chains on the bottom, which you use to attach to the ship's deck so that the tables don't move around when the ship is yawing and heaving. So then after that, he actually then was travelling back to Bordeaux as was his wont, and he came across a wine supplier in the Libourne area who was selling wines from Pomerol and Saint-Emilion. Now everyone in England knew about Saint-Emilion, but nobody had ever heard of Pomerol. So in the 1950s, he was the first person to bring Petrus to England. My father joined the business in the 60s, and he became the first person to bring Australian wines to the UK. And then in the 70s, he did the same for New Zealand. And we were the first agents for McWilliams in Australia and Tyrrell's, and for Nobilo in New Zealand. I then joined the business in 1999, and one of my first little babies is the first one we're going to taste today, the Averys Alsace, which I blended in 2008, having left England on the first day of Terminal 5 opening. And yes, there were problems. So yes, we're going to start with the Alsace. This is one of the first wines that I ever actually blended as a wine buyer, my little baby. And I went over to Cave de Hunneveer in Alsace to make it. So pour yourself a nice glassful. Take the wine up to the widest point in the glass if you're using any form of wine glass. That means you get the most area of evaporation for a good nose full of wine. Swirl it around, again, more evaporation. And then a deep breath and take in the wonderful aromatics of this glorious wine. There's actually a slight pinky hue to it, but I'll come on to that again later when we talk about the Pinot Blanc grape variety. So, Alsace. Alsace, as I always used to think, was a valley. Turns out it's not. It has a lovely steep hillside and mountains of the Vosges Mountains on one side, and then a very flat plain on the other side. It has been French and German and French and German and French and German, and is currently French. And from that, we have got grape varieties there that are quite a lot of German grape varieties, Gewürztraminers, Rieslings. But also there are a few French grape varieties in there, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris. So with this wine, it is a blend of two grape varieties, a Pinot Blanc and a Silvaner. In the past, when I first made it, we did add a dash of Gewürztraminer, but vintage variation, sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. And we've decided to make a much more floral and elegant wine this year. So the Cave de Hunneveer, they are on the lower edges of the hillsides as you go up further north of Rijkveer. Rijkveer is one of those wonderful medieval towns with a wall around it, and it's very like the child catchers area in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It's a beautiful place to go. Cave de Hunneveer is just further north. There's a wonderful church just on the edge of the town, and it's got those lovely steep roofs that are in orange, which helps when it does snow for the snow to fall off. The Vosges Mountains protect the valley from too much rainfall, and you also get the doctor wind coming through, which helps with the health of the grapes. The steep slopes are not quite as sort of steep as you might get in the Mosel Valley of Germany. They're still pretty tough for any grape pickers at harvest, and it is almost all hand harvested because machines just can't get up and down the hills. So we've got Pinot Blanc here, and that is a grape variety that produces very sort of white stone fruit notes, but it is related to Pinot Noir, and so every so often you will get a hint of this sort of pinky colour in the wine, which is from the grape skin, which is a slightly greyer than green colour, and depending on how long you leave the juice on the skin and macerate the wine, you'll get more colour coming through. As I say, Pinot Blanc, it's a grape variety that is in the Alsace produces a richer wine, and it has a lovely stone fruit, slightly appley hints. But there is a lot of nice acidity in the wine, but again, it's not quite as acidic as some of the German styles that you get. You also have Silvaner here, and that's a much more floral, more delicate flavour profile, but it also adds a little bit more acidity because, as I say, the Pinot Blanc is less acidic and needs a little bit of structure through the backbone, and that makes it a very good foodie wine. These wines go very well with quite a lot of different cheeses. I mean, obviously the French would say it would go best with French cheeses, but it's one of the few wines that actually goes very well with the white rindy cheeses as Brie or Camembert, things like that. But there's a lovely sort of richness on the nose and on the palate, and it has quite a texture to it where, for example, a Pinot Gris or Pinot Grigio from Italy would be lighter and more slips down more easily. This has got a bit more structure to it, which gives it a bit more character and helps it to lend itself to food and drinking with food. So Alsace in the east of France has the cool continental climate being inland, but also it has the Vosges Mountains to its west, which stops any rainfall coming into it. So it's a very dry region, which is absolutely perfect for growing aromatic varietals. It means the aromatic varietals can get to a ripeness level, but they're not affected by any problems with any rots because of damp, and then they can get to full maturity. This is why the grape varieties used also produce much drier wines than in Germany, because they're allowed to get to full ripeness. It's also a perfect area for using biodynamic and organic style of winemaking and vine growing, because it means that you don't have to use fungicides, let alone pesticides, which is much healthier for the environment. So the second wine in this masterclass is our Averys Coterone. Again, proves very popular at the event at Winchester. It's a multi-grape variety wine, and I'll explain a bit more about the grape varieties later. Again, pour to the widest point of the glass so you get the most aromatics coming through the nose. So the Coterone is in the southeastern area of France, and it's based around the town of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and you have going north more Syrah-based wines, and going south more of a blend. Lots of different grape varieties, up to 13 different grape varieties in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The Coterone region tends to produce wines that are more colloquially known as GSMs, or SGMs, or MGSs. And this is down to the initials of the main 3 grape varieties that are in them. So GSM is Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre. Grenache is an interesting grape variety. I don't particularly like it when it's on its own. It's also known as Garnacha in Spain. And it's a grape variety that can be quite earthy and savoury, and have some quite pokey, meaty sort of aromas and flavours. I do prefer it when it's in a blend, but also when it's had sort of perfect ripeness, so it's a little bit juicier. But when we're doing our tasting upstairs and choosing wines for the range, I'm often brought in at the end to say, okay, you don't like Grenache, taste through them and see which you think is qualitatively the best. Because if you don't like something, you're very likely to be able to see which are the better versions of what you don't like. So we've got Grenache here, which is blended perfectly with the wonderful Syrah grape variety. You may have come across Syrah as Syrah generally in Europe and Shiraz in the New World. They are the same grape variety. There are quite a lot of different strains of the grape variety, but basically Syrah and Shiraz are the same. They produce wonderfully black fruit and lots of pepper. And in particular, if you get a Syrah from New Zealand in the Gimlet Gravels, it's a very proper cracked black pepper style of grape variety, and it can add wonderful structure and flavours to the wine. So the third major grape variety in this blend is Mourvèdre. Mourvèdre is lovely and dark-skinned, gives a nice sort of dark fruit but quite bright flavours, and a lovely freshness, almost a sort of floral note, a little bit like the Petit Verdot of Bordeaux. It adds structure but with a violet hint. And this is all the pieces added together, plus the fact that the wine has been oaked, makes them all meld. So you get your different flavours and then you meld them together to produce a lovely, rounded, juicy, I'd say soft, but it's actually quite a big wine, but it's got just those lovely, soft, elongated flavours. And it goes brilliantly with all sorts of foods and cheeses, but in particular, it can be drunk on its own. It's a very popular wine. I sell quite a lot of it to people who have it for their wedding wines because it just pleases so many people. It's very difficult to go wrong with the Côte d'Rhône. This is mainly due to the climate in the area. The Rhône Valley is a very long valley. It runs from sort of almost Lyon area, all the way down to Marseille and Nice. And it's basically starts at the top of the wine producing area with Syrah and very high steep-sided slopes where you'd get your Hermitage and your Creuse Hermitage. And then it goes down, and as you get towards Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the river widens and you get less slopes in the area. But of course, you then warm up quite a lot, and then the Mediterranean influence towards the south. Occasionally, as in 2 years ago, you can get some very serious floods there. And of course, there have been floods this year, but they've been even further south, more in the Nice area. But 2018 was a lovely warm vintage throughout. They missed out on the frosts that affected Bordeaux and Burgundy. And these because of the blend of grape varieties, it's very helpful if one grape variety misses out on extra ripening, or another one is hit earlier on by frost. You can actually blend that away, and you will come out with, using the portions of grape varieties, you can still come out with a lovely even flavoured wine. And that's the great thing about blends, is quite often they are much more than the sum of their parts, because they can just add to each other, and you get just a lovely softness and roundness and extra complexity from the different grape varieties. You get in the Rhone Valley, you get these wonderful soils that are covered in galettes. Galettes are quite large pebbles, sort of ranging in size, but around about this big. And they have a wonderful attribute in that when the sun shines on them, because they're all white, sun shines on them, so white, they absorb the heat during the day, and at the night they let it release gently underneath the vines, and it reflects back onto the grapes, that although you would leave a canopy of leaves to protect them so you don't get sunburnt grapes, you get this lovely warmth still ripening throughout the evening as well as during the daytime. This creates a much longer ripening period for the grapes, and again, so you get these rich black and red fruit flavours coming through because the grapes have been able to ripen to perfection. And the skins are also ripened too, which means that when you are leaving the juice on the skins, the maceration will bring out lots of fruit flavours, but those tannins will be nice and soft as opposed to quite hard and astringent. And so to our final wine, which is a Bordeaux from the Haut Médoc. It's our Averys Haut Médoc 2015 vintage. Crunchy black fruit. So the Haut Médoc, this is from a producer at Chateau Mouret, and the wine is 60% Merlot and 40% Cabernet Sauvignon. Bordeaux, as everyone knows, is a classic claret producer. Claret was a name given to it by the English a couple of hundred years ago, variation on the theme of claret, but it's become synonymous with Bordeaux now. The regions in Bordeaux, you have what we term as left bank and right bank. The Gironde runs all the way through from the Atlantic coast down past Bordeaux, and then splits into two more rivers. And the Gironde, although it runs at an angle, left bank and right bank could be switched with north bank and south bank. The right bank, north side, is Saint-Emilion and Pomerol, and the left bank, south side, is the Médoc, that runs up to the north with the Haut Médoc up near the Atlantic, and further south you get Pauillac, Saint-Estèphe, Saint-Julien, coming down into Bordeaux, and then you get Pessac-Léognan and the Coterone region, and then you go further into the Entre-deux-Mers, which is between the two rivers, where lots of lovely, easy drinking Bordeaux are made, red and white. So we have Merlot and Cabernet blend in this wine, and as I said before, the blend is often bigger than the sum of its parts, and that is a classic way of thinking of Bordeaux. Quite often you will get Cabernet Sauvignon, which is quite a late ripener, and with the vintages that we've had in the past, it's not always quite fully ripe, so you get a lovely tannin structure, which gives it great body, but you need a little bit of Merlot to fill in what we call the hole in the Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon produces cassis fruit flavours, and the Merlot is more cherry. So here we've got a lovely black crunchy fruit aromatic, which is reminiscent of black cherries with a slightly softer cassis underneath, but a lovely structured length with a bit of acidity and tannin to make it a very food-friendly wine. In Bordeaux, when I was learning about the Bordeaux region, it was where they always told you about slopes. And when I was thinking slopes, I was thinking hillsides. When you get to Bordeaux, there is very little height difference from down in the valley by the river to the top of those hills. But even there, just a little bit of a slope facing towards the sunshine makes such a difference in the ripening of the grapes. And also, of course, we have climate change. And with climate change, the grapes are getting much, much riper, much earlier. And this year, for example, there were certain vineyards that had completely finished their picking of their grapes before the end of September, which is almost unheard of. Having said that, they had massive storms in June, July, and hail to boot in April. And this basically really decimated quite a lot of small pockets of areas in Bordeaux. And this means that their yields this year are much lower. But where they didn't lose all their grapes to the hail and the storms, they've produced a much better vintage, and it's looking fantastic for 2020. Fingers crossed. This particular wine, there are various different ways that people tend their vineyards that can be just regular. I have a vine, I'm going to look after it the same way I would look after a rose, for example. Vines are climbers, so they can do fairly much what they want when they want, and you don't have to look after them too much. But sometimes people like to do things sustainably, and being sustainable means that you are looking after the soil, you're looking after the vine, and you're looking after the health of your vineyard workers. In France, they call this Lutte Raisonnée or Terre Vitis, and this wine is Lutte Raisonnée. And it means that they are very particular about using less pesticides, less insecticides, and putting less chemicals into the ground, which is very sort of the way I think the world is going in this modern era. If you want to go a step further, you'd be heading into organics, and beyond that, biodynamics, all of which are very good for the soil and the environment, and good for the wine that they produce. So along with blending grape varieties, there is also the option to oak your wines. This wine has had a lovely amount of oak. It's really integrated the grape varieties, which the time when they're left in tank or in oak means that the flavours meld together more. But with oak, you get this oxygenation. It's very, very mild if you think about how much oxygen might go through a piece of wood. But nevertheless, if you look at when you cut through a piece of wood and you get those grains, those grains do allow a certain amount of oxygen to go through, and in particular where the two pieces of wood are put together in the barrel, again a little bit of oxygen ingress there. But the tannins from the wood, and when you toast a barrel, you can get low toasting, medium toasting, high toasting, and depending on the barrel toasting, that also imparts caramel and nut flavours to the wine. And so ultimately you get this lovely fruit structure and fruit blending with a coat of oak on it. And to varying degrees, that might be anything from a little summer light coat to a full-on heavy woolen winter coat. In this instance, it is a judicious amount of oak, so you can just about feel the creaminess in the texture and some buttery notes on the palate, but it's certainly not overpowering of the wonderful black and red fruits that you've got going on in the wine. It also helps to soften out the acidity, but the acidity is still there, giving a lovely length of finish to the wine, and that lingers on your palate in a very lovely, elegant way. Well, thank you very much for listening. It's Mimi Averys at Averys Wine Merchants down in our cellars in Bristol. I would like to thank Peter, Susie and Rosie very much for organising this event. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think it's been wonderful, even though it's online. And I do miss seeing you all in person. We do have a lot of fun, and it is a very lovely party atmosphere when we're down in the Guildhall. Hope to see you all there next year. Don't forget to go on their website to find out how to purchase any of our wines. We do have a special offer for any wine festival attendees of £15 off. You will need to phone the shop or the events team, and their email addresses are on the website as well, and they will be able to do this for you. If you want, when you place your order, don't forget to ask for a personal wine advisor. They will be your guru of all things wine and Averys related, and they can give you access to small parcels that come in that don't get out to our regular customers. And also, if there's a wine you like that happens to be out of stock, they'll be able to tell you when your wine is back in stock. They're a great advantage to being an Averys customer, and that will be your personal wine advisor. And that's a free service that we offer to all our customers. Thank you very much for listening again. Mimi Averys. I hope to see you all next year in Winchester. But it's been lovely to spend time with you today. Thank you.